Hi everyone, I hope all is well for you today. For my final presentation, I chose to do the human manual over how to get rid of the fear of roaches. I hope this works for you the way it worked for me. And I'm going to be showing a lot of roach pictures in my presentation, so please be prepared. Now, let's get into this. The fear of roaches is also known as Caesarophobia. This is a fear that a person will feel unsafe when they see a roach. Here are some symptoms of roach phobia: becoming paralyzed or frozen, crying and screaming, feeling dizzy or weak, sometimes fainting, having elevated heart rate, breathing rapidly, having a panic attack where it feels like you're being choked, or experiencing chest pains. The fear of roaches often leads to obsessive-compulsive disorder. For example, if someone is afraid of roaches, like I was, they would try to clean their house thoroughly to make sure these creatures stay away. Sometimes they would constantly spray insecticide in the house and their cars, sweep their floors, brush the rugs, vacuum carpets, clean kitchens, bathrooms, etc. But the fear of roaches can sometimes get out of hand or dangerous, because sometimes when someone is too afraid of roaches, they would run out onto the road to try and get away from these creatures. If you are the person who is afraid of roaches, don't worry. You are not alone. So, were we born with fear? The answer is innate fear, which is what we are born with. The fear of falling and the fear of loud sounds, and the rest are just learned fears. Let me explain a little bit about fear. Fear is not just being afraid of something. Fear is an emotion induced by perceived danger or threat that causes physiological changes and ultimately behavioral changes, such as fleeing, hiding, or freezing from perceived traumatic events. Fear in human beings may occur in response to a certain stimulus occurring in the present, or in anticipation or expectation of future threat perceived as a risk to ourselves. The fear response comes from the perception or danger leading to confrontation with or escape from the threat, and this might sound familiar to you: the fight or flight response. And in extreme cases of fear, some people would freeze or paralyze. In humans and animals, fear is modulated by the process of cognition and learning. We talked about this in class, remember? So, fear is judged as rational or appropriate and irrational or inappropriate. And an irrational fear is called a phobia. Fear can be closely related to the emotion anxiety. This occurs when the result of threats are uncontrollable or unavoidable. The fear response serves as survival by appropriate behavior responses. Sociological and organizational research also suggests that individuals' fear are not solely dependent on their nature, but are also shaped by their social relations and culture, which guides their understanding of when and how much fear to feel. Before I forget, there is a difference between fear and phobia. While you're reading the chart I placed there for you, I will explain the difference between fear and phobia, so try your best to multitask. A fear is an emotional response to a real or perceived threat. A phobia is similar to a fear with one key difference, which is the anxiety they experience, and it is so strong that it interferes with their quality of life and or their ability to function. Okay, back to roaches. Why do some people fear them and others do not? Well, this all depends on your childhood. Remember what I said about fear, that we are born with innate fear? Okay, so as we grow up, The fear reactions that we experience of others around us can contribute to the development of childhood fears. For example, if a child sees people scream because of a roach or swat at it, this could develop a certain reaction towards the roach for that child. When I was little, I had a large dog that stayed outside, and we would keep his bag of food in the storage shed. So when it came time to feed him, one day I reached into the bag and grabbed a handful of dog food and also one large cockroach. And it bit me, and that's how I developed the fear of roaches. Anyways, some people are afraid of roaches because they can hide in dark places and they can crawl out unexpectedly. And that's true. Other people feel like the roach would invade their homes to eat their food or spread diseases. There are some people who are not afraid of roaches, but be careful because those people can sometimes get stuck in an unexpected situation, and this would develop a new fear. And a new fear that develops is in the amygdala. And we talked about this in class too. So, here is a graph that shows you who is most likely to have phobias. And you can see that it shows females are in the high percentage of developing phobias. But sometimes this is not always accurate, so it's just a guess. Now, how to get rid of the fear of roaches? The first method is classical conditioning method. People can learn to get used to the roaches. You can see in the picture that in the title it says exposure therapy, and that's okay because it's related to classical conditioning. So just pretend that the rabbit is a cockroach. Let me first explain the 4 basic principles, which I know you're familiar with already, but I'll pretend that you don't know. So, the first principle is the unconditioned stimulus, a stimulus of any act, influence, or agent that creates a response. An unconditioned stimulus is when the stimulus automatically triggers some type of response. For example, the unconditioned stimulus in this picture is the milk and cookies. The second principle is unconditioned response. This is a response that is automatically triggered as a result of the unconditioned stimulus. This is a natural, unconscious reaction to whatever the stimulus might be. The third principle is conditioned stimulus, and this is when a neutral stimulus becomes associated with unconditioned stimulus, triggering conditioned response. The last principle is conditioned response, and this is a response that was learned from the neutral stimulus. And you can see in the picture here, it explains it a little bit more clear. It's a little bit easier to understand. So, the second method to how to get rid of the fear of roaches is the problem-solving cycle. This could be a good way to solve a problem through steps. But even though the steps are listed in order, even if the steps are listed in order, people rarely follow these steps in order, as I said before. Some will skip various steps or go back several times before they reach their goal. So, the first step is to identify the problem. It may sound simple, but it is important to identify the source of the problem carefully, or any attempt to solve the problem will be insufficient, inefficient, and it would be useless. Number 2, define the problem and identify limitations, because once the existence of a problem has been identified, a person must fully define what their problem is in order for it to be solved. And number 3, form a solution strategy. The approach to create a strategy will depend on the situation and the unique preference of the individual. The fourth one is organize information about the problem. A person must organize any available information so they can be prepared to come up with a fitting solution. Number 5. Allocate and use the mental and physical resources needed. Depending on the importance of the problem, it might be necessary to allocate certain resources of money, time, or something else. But if the problem is not as important, using too many resources may not be essential to coming up with a solution. Number 6. Monitoring progress. If no progress is being made, then it is time to reevaluate the approach and search for different strategies. And the last one, number 7. Evaluate the results for accuracy. To make sure the solution was the absolute best outcome, the results must be evaluated. This can either be done over time, such as evaluating the results of a workout, or it can be immediately, such as checking the solution to a math problem. Okay, now we move on to interesting facts about roaches. Learning good things about roaches can help your mind reprogram your fear of them. Let's see. Watch these 2 videos to learn about roaches. In the second video, it is important for you to see how she was afraid of the roach, but she had to overcome her fear to get rid of it on her own. You can go back to watch these later on your own, because I still need to talk to you about spontaneous recovery. So, moving on. Spontaneous recovery is a phenomenon of learning and memory that was first named and described by Ivan Pavlov. In his studies of classical conditioning, spontaneous recovery refers to the re-emergence of a previously extinguished condition, a response after a delay. That wasn't so bad after all, was it? Now, more videos. You can watch this later, but this is Shelby Counterman, and she is an insect collector, mostly roaches, but the video is very interesting. And this is a cool web page that tells you all the celebrities with phobias. There's even a celebrity with a roach phobia. See if you can guess who it is. And that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. Also, best of luck to you overcoming your fears. You can do it, and I believe in you very much.